Hi, everybody. This is David, and welcome to the Week 3 Fireside Chat. You might be able to tell that I do have a cold, and my voice is going out somewhat, but we're going to get through this. And up on the North Star weather dial down here in the unheated studio, it is a brisk 52 degrees, so let's get into it. The Sauk County Shared Services article and the other Shared Services article get into the opportunities of working with your neighboring districts to maximize use of staff, resources, and training. When I was a young director starting out in Reedsburg, I was able to work with other new directors in Baraboo, River Valley, over in Sauk, and we were able to share staff. For example, I had a bilingual speech-language pathologist, English and Spanish, and periodically she would go to other districts within our little consortium, and she would provide evaluations for students who spoke Spanish where they might have speech-language concerns. So that was a benefit. I did receive some services back in terms of some transition consulting, and then also some functional behavioral assessment specialists from other districts, and also a high school reading specialist came in from another district that specifically worked with students with disabilities. A huge help. So we were just able to move kind of those resources around. I was very careful, though, and prudent in the allocation of my speech-language pathologist. She was contracted with our district. I always gave her the option not to go to another district to do an evaluation, but she wanted to do this, and it was a handful of times, through the year, maybe like 5 times, and she felt it helped her skills out, but if it was something where we were getting too many requests, or I thought it would burn her out or take her significantly away from her caseload, I would not have allowed that to happen. That wouldn't have been good for anyone. But in this case, it worked out really well. We also shared resources. We had an entire website. It's gone now, but we had a website that we created just as directors and maintained ourselves. We would share assistive technology. We would share assessments, equipment, things like Riften chairs that we weren't using. Stuff would go back and forth as we would need it. Worked great. We had the endorsement of our superintendents, more of a handshake agreement. And at the end of the year, we'd kind of balance everything out. We weren't changing dollars, exchanging dollars on any of this. So we did some significant cooperative trainings too. So all the districts would be together for these trainings. One was in allergy awareness and allergy management. So we had our nurses from the districts. We also had some of the business managers, some of the principals, so they understood how different districts were setting up their cafeterias, some of the buildings and grounds people. It was incredible. We also had presentations by high school alternative students on how to go into the elementary schools and do education about washing your hands, singing the ABC song. And then they bought some black lights and let the kids put their hands under these black light boxes as they would come out to see if they still had residue on their hands and if they need to go back in and wash them. Was phenomenal. But that was a great way for a lot of knowledge to be shared of just like, how are you doing things here? And, that might be something I want to do, or here's something that we do that I want you to be aware of. And something that came out of that, I'll never forget this, was a recommendation by one of the nurses of saying, make sure that you work with your kitchen and when they order like all of their applesauce for the school year or something like that, that they try to stay with the same vendor. Because if they stay like with Cisco, then the sugar count and carb counts will pretty much always be the same for that product. But if they go if they rebid it every quarter, they might go Cisco, then US Blue, and then other companies. So then it's still applesauce, but maybe it has more sugar, less sugar or something. So then when it's being put on the tray, it's the same amount, but it has a different sugar or carb count. So it's hard to manage type 1 diabetes when you're changing out your products, even though they still seem the same, like it's applesauce. And I wrote an article, I think Apples for Applesauce was the title. It is out there. You can find it. Talks about this. Probably wrote it 10 years ago. Still very relevant today. So here's something else we did for a training. We did a suicide prevention training. We hosted it at Reedsburg High School at the Performing Arts Center. And again, so we had like 5 districts. The DPI came down. They were thrilled to do it because there were a lot of people there, right? So you're addressing 5 districts all at once. And it was our neighboring districts that if we had something happen, either it was a suicide or a car accident or something like that, and we're calling upon our staff to help console students and help support staff and community. And then also how we would accept other staff into our system as we were processing that, like from our neighboring districts to help us out. And then how we would interface with those districts, like who would be the go-to people, and those people then would assign us, our staff, to different support roles. So we kind of worked all of that out, and the DPI did a phenomenal presentation and really said that was the model for how to do that. Because again, these are the people that you knew face to face, that if something did happen and you were going to their district or they're coming to your district, you had already trained with them and received that same training with someone that might have been sitting, next to you. So it's very congruent. Now here's something I want to share that came up as an issue. So when I was a director, there was a completed suicide in a neighboring district. The director there called me and said, we need support. Could you send over 2 counselors and a psychologist? And I said, yes. So, but I need it in that situation to check with my superintendent first. And I had a hard time getting in contact with the superintendent. So I couldn't get in contact with the superintendent. So I got a hold of the business manager, and the business manager said, well, who's going to pay for this? Which isn't the right question to ask at all. It's a horrible question to ask. And I said, well, I don't know. But I said, we still need to do this. This is the right thing to do. So it just got delayed. And then finally we got our support over there a few hours later, and the district had other support coming in. But I felt really, really bad about this because it shouldn't have gone this way at all. So, for example, in fire departments, there's a thing called mutual aid. So if there is a fire and you need additional support services, there's this network built in of then you get support services from the other fire departments around you. So it's mutual aid, and that's what this is. And you have to have this very streamlined. So you don't have to have like all of these conditions of, well, who gets paid, or, what if they're there for whatever, who pays for their meals or their mileage before like you send somebody. So I regret, I should have just sent the people instead of trying to wait through the hierarchy above me to figure all of this out. That was garbage. But anyway, we did come up with a memorandum of understanding. And Peter, thanks for mentioning that and bringing that up many times, and anything you can share with that would be appreciated. So a memorandum of understanding saying that the director unilaterally could decide if staff needed to be sent to another district to support. Staff had the opportunity to accept or refuse that assignment. Most cases, they would always accept it. But then we would pay for that staff member for the time that they were over there, and we would pay for their expenses. And usually, so we're talking neighboring districts, so it might be 1 day, maybe 2 max. And then we knew then if we had a need, people would be coming over to us. They wouldn't have to be going through the red tape. If there was need somewhere else, we would be able to dispatch, and we wouldn't have the red tape. We ran it by the school board. They were fine with it. And the other part I said too is this is, first of all, it's not only the right thing to do, like in an emergency situation, we need to do this. So it's the right thing to do. But also it's a great way to keep our staff very sharp. If they're coming over and supporting somebody else, then they're getting, it's almost like a professional development in a way, because they're getting exposed to what this situation might be. So if it does happen again in our district, they're better prepared to support our staff and students. So that was just an awkward time as a director, and I probably should have been much more forceful in just making that decision and letting the chips fall where they will. And that's something I would recommend to you. Always act in the best interest of the student. And that time, I was in a situation that I didn't act in the best interest of the student because I didn't feel I had much discretion afforded to me in the system I was in. Looking back, though, I should have sent the people and just taken the repercussions later, because the right thing to do would have been to have contacted the staff and said, you're needed in this district. And all of them did eventually go once I contacted them, but they would have gone and been there in 30 minutes. So the SWOT analysis assignment: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So all you're doing for this is creating headings: strengths, and then underneath 8 strengths, weaknesses, 8 weaknesses, 8 opportunities, 8 threats, and then underneath that put stakeholders and list stakeholders. It looks really easy, right? It's really simple, but you got to think about it. Okay, it's more complicated than simply just making a list. Now, this is a bullet point activity. I'm not asking for you to justify why you list the thing as a weakness or as a threat or whatever. Like budget cuts is a threat. Okay, I get it. Makes sense. Opportunity could be sharing services with neighboring districts. Okay, I get it. Makes sense. So these are types of, I'm going to go weakness. Our induction process is a weakness. Okay, that's a weakness, but you can make that into a strength, right? Like you can improve that. So you want to go through, and ultimately this is a great way to help people make incremental changes that compound over time. So, for example, if you do a SWOT analysis, and people can understand this, like it's not too complicated for them. They can wrap their head around this. Your school staff, and you say, okay, we're going to figure out, let's and not brainstorm, not that you come up with an affinity process where you're listing 10,000 of these things, but like 8 weaknesses, 8 strengths, and opportunities, and threats, so forth. And then you identify, okay, so our strengths, we want to maintain the strengths. So we don't want to take anything away. We want to maintain our strengths. And then you're looking at, threats, really like how can we mitigate our threats, like open enrollment out, like, okay, we know that's a threat. How are we going to mitigate that? So, but your biggest thing is with weaknesses and opportunities, because, weaknesses and opportunities are things that you can change and move into strengths. So an opportunity might be, we can offer more classes at our high school, and provide some special education co-teaching if we go to like a block schedule. So that's maybe an opportunity. So we can explore that. If that happens, then it moves into a strength. We already talked, about a weakness could be like induction process. So how do you take that weakness and change it into a strength? So what you do is you try to figure out then 1 or 2 weaknesses or opportunities, and you want to move those over to strengths. So those are incremental steps. And if you can do that as a director, if you can move like 2 or 3 things a year, okay, even like 2 things a year, and you're a director for 3 years, you move 6 significant things over. That's a lot, okay? At a time when most places are regressing because there's so much turnover, like people do the job for 2 years and leave. There's no induction, there's no legacy knowledge, no institutional memory, nothing. So that's where the SWOT is so helpful. Now the stakeholders seem fairly obvious, but they can go a little bit deeper. Like, your real estate agents. Well, they always, if your schools are great, if they're coming out with, you're doing things that are being recognized for a district, or your school report cards, stuff like that, they're going to share that information out. Trust me, like when they're trying to sell homes, and your local employers, because they want to have a strong base of, competent workers coming in from your schools into the job force. So you have a lot of different stakeholders, in addition to just obviously like the parents and the school board and stuff like that. So just think about as you put that together. So one of the things like with SWOT analysis is this is where, like a weakness could be discovered of saying, our students with disabilities don't perform well in math at the 8th grade level. Okay, so let's look at that. Maybe that's something we want to address, make that into a strength. But that gets deeper, because how do you do that? Well, maybe it's professional development. Maybe we just don't send a lot of people to trainings on math, or we don't do like our internal math professional development or whatever. So maybe that's the core issue of what's going on here is we're just not doing adequate professional development in this area. So, like when you get into your plan at the end of class, your people services plan, it might be, we are going to analyze what professional development staff attend, and then we're going to cross-reference that to the needs of our district, as identified, through either what's showing up in IPs or test scores or grades or whatever, but and make sure that what we're sending people to align with what the needs of the district are versus things that people are comfortable in going to, so they go every year to the same conference, which there's some value in that sometimes because you have a network of colleagues that you get to visit with. But again, most of the times professional development is not lining up very well with the actual authentic data-driven needs of the district. The Community Health Needs Assessment, the China, check it out. If you're a People Services Director, you should be a member of that committee that does that. Type in Adams County plus China, CHNA. You'll see that their Director of Special Education, I think a couple counselors are on it. La Crosse, a few years ago, the Special Ed Director became part of it for La Crosse County, right? I believe La Crosse County. But you need to be on that because the Community Health Needs Assessment needs to be responsive to schools as part of their population. So it is a great way to help you get access to, for example, people who might be able to help you out with mental health screenings in the school, from the medical side, helping with contacts with the medical side for especially mental health services. Sometimes if it is understanding the health screenings of children and how referrals go, if people don't have insurance or if you need, dental services or whatever it is. But that Community Health Needs Assessment, the great part of that is that's driven by the medical community. It has to legally be driven by them. That's their report they have to do. So this is one time as a school when this isn't all falling on your shoulders. You have a great opportunity to figure out the ways that China process can help you. And trust me, it does. Go to the Adams Friendship, the Adams County. The district benefits greatly from being represented as that China was developed. You can read through the document. It's online. Play to your strengths. We have the video, Marcus Buckingham. So again, playing to your strengths. How many times do we sacrifice in IEP meetings that we don't play to our strengths? We don't play to the students' strengths. What we try to increase deficit areas, and usually end up sacrificing strength areas to do that. So, look at what are we taking a student out of in order to give them whatever or something like that. So it's one of these things, it's again, playing to your strengths. And that's where this whole shared services type thing also kind of comes on that theme of play to your strengths as a director. Like I knew I was very good at like coordinating some of the stuff like this. I knew like another director who was great at like billing spreadsheets. So when we had our audits, he would share those out and we could just kind of type in all of our information. When you had your self-assessment, it would give nice reports and all of this, and another director who was like great at going down and getting all the legislative updates and representing our consortium down in Madison. And I actually testified on Medicaid once down at the Capitol to represent our organization consortium. So again, play to your strengths. Look for your internal experts. We have so many times we have people who are just wonderful with autism knowledge. So they have this depth. Maybe even they have kids with autism. Yet we go outside. There are terrific outside consultants. Some of you have mentioned, like Imagine Child's Capacity. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But you might have someone who's really great with technology. In your smaller district, you don't have an assistive technology person, or if you contract from a CISA, it's someone you're getting one time a month or something like that. But like that this person, Jim or Sarah, is like really good with iPads and assistive technology and figuring stuff out. So if you really gave them some time in their schedule to work on that, they would be able to meet the needs of your district so that you have internal experts. Capitalize on those folks. Say some shout outs here. Well, shout out here, right here to me. So I did an interview with Giles Rise Jones from What Three Words. It's a company, what3words.com. It's podcast number 90 on the Safety Doc podcast. So, all of that stuff's up above. But he talked about 3-word addressing. And this is going to be very, very significant for schools very, very, very soon. It's already built into Mercedes-Benz navigation systems. It basically takes the entire world, it's mapped it out, 3 meters by 3 meter squares, and then it gives it three word address. So, it could be meatball, sand, and actor. And then that is like this actual 3 by 3 area, which could be an entrance to a school. Now, you can map out actually an entire school this way. So you can know where you are first with this free app system, know your entire campus. It's really great, though, as a special education pupil services director for your reunification process if you ever need to evacuate. Because to try to figure out your evacuation site ahead of time is pointless. I'm telling you, it is pointless. Don't do it because you do not know what the perimeter is going to be. If it's a active shooter scene, if someone's on the loose or something like that, people could be, locked down. They could establish a perimeter. It's going to be a mile or 2 miles away. If it's a situation going on, like in summer with the Sun Prairie explosion, for example, that was devastating to downtown. What if that would have happened during the school year, during a school day? What would the perimeter area safely have been? So, you might think, well, we're going to go 2 blocks away or 3 blocks away to like this church, and this will be like our site for evacuation and reunification. And suddenly it's like, well, the radius is now 8 blocks for, the perimeter. You can't go anywhere within this 8 blocks. So now your whole plan is ruined. So people are expecting to go to a certain place. Some of them still might try to go there. They're going to be confused. Parents might try to go there. So it's better to work the problem. Apollo 13 approach. Think about that. The Apollo 13 approach. Something happens. You work the problem. Law enforcement will tell you, here is what the perimeter is going to be. It's sometimes even they push a perimeter out further. But here's the perimeter. We're going to be outside of here. Here's the site we're going to use for unification. Then you can have a what 3-word address that you issue, and it can bring you right to the door of the building where you want people to go. So trust me, this is the way that things will be. This will save pages in your safety books. And do not practice evacuating to a site 3 blocks away when you do not know that is the site that you're going to be going to, because you will never know the perimeter until the incident actually occurs. I can't say this enough. I'm writing a white paper on this. I'm studying this with the company, what3words.com. I work in disaster relief. I consult all over the country on this. Do not do a set evacuation site. I don't care who tells you in your district. That's a different opinion, I guess, than mine. Well, I guess I do care because, you have to listen. But I'm telling you, it's better to work the problem and identify this afterwards. Sarah, you talked about services contractor from CISA. You talked about COMAN. I actually oversaw COMAN when I was with CISA. So COMAN was Columbia Marquette Adolescent Needs, basically day school for students with severe behavioral needs. At that time, it was age 14 and older, where then they could either graduate from COMAN or be reintegrated into their home district, or be integrated into another district. Very much driven on a points system, and one day fully was for community service. I thought it was a great program. I always loved going there for a half day a week. They did have their on-site person who was kind of like, their director and things like that. So, and I could go out there more if I needed to. But again, that was a great program to have as a shared service through CISA, because we always had like a slot the districts would buy into. So then if they did have a student that had needs that were beyond what the district could serve, they could go to Coleman and sometimes have those needs served there. You talked about online speech services, especially for early childhood. It's very interesting. I'd like you to talk more about how that's developing your district, what that looks like. I'm a speech language pathologist with my master's, my PhD, is all safety, high stakes decision making and logistics, things like that. But I get contacted weekly with offers to do like online speech language all over the country. So I know that the demand out there is just immense for this. And I believe Sparta has been doing this for quite a while and other districts are doing it. But literally, like with the setup I have, like right here, I could do it like all day. Nothing I'm interested in doing, but I'd like to hear about how that got rolling in your district. You also talked about Medicaid claiming, working with CISA for part of that. And I think Medicaid claiming as a director is you need to be working with somebody who really knows their stuff in Medicaid, who can come in, whether that's CISA or whether it's like an MJ Care, whatever it is, and they can help you identify your students who would be eligible for attendant care and all of the possible billable services. Because once you bring them in and kind of go kid by kid and look at the services and the IEP, and they can actually get eyes on the kid and look through the services, you're probably going to recover much more money than what you're doing right now. So your Medicaid reimbursement, can be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. Stevens Point used theirs a few years ago to build an entire, next to the SPASH, their high school, kind of like a post-secondary training facility. It was basically like a big house. So kids could learn how to, do shopping, cook in a house, do all of the upkeep and things like that you typically would do in a house. So, but make sure with Medicaid claiming, again, districts mostly underclaim, especially for attendant care. So that's where if your CISA can help you out on what's billable, or else your other third-party agency. Carrie and Denise, services sharing in Belmont, indicating it's a rural area. It's kind of hard. I know it's kind of, it's near Platteville. I've been there. One of the things I think you need to think about is also what's in Iowa. When we had our Dane County Special Education Directors meetings and we would hold them in Lake Mills, the Dubuque, Iowa Special Ed Director would come to those meetings because she said, we have nothing in Dubuque to really support us. Like we don't have a network or anything like that. And that was a while ago, but I also know that the Hudson School District works with a district right across the Mississippi River to do collaborative services. So I think what you need to do is to really look at the services down there in that Belmont, Platteville area, and maybe into that greater Dubuque area. So don't let the Wisconsin boundary be your limitation. I believe there are opportunities down there. I completely would think that that's doable. Again, just knowing that the Dubuque person, was coming up and wanting to partner in and wanting to, understand the services that we had and even sending staff up to trainings and stuff like that. So Jolene, I'll wrap it up here. Jolene, you mentioned a 10% special education director from CISA as a contract. I think that your district was receiving this 10% special ed director. My personal thought on that's insufficient. So your needs are more than 10%, because even a small district still has to do bullying and harassment education, has to make sure that IDEA is provided, making sure that all of the disability services, autism, OHI, 504, all of that needs to be covered. So even if you're a small district, OSEP reporting, all of that is still there. All of the needs, the mental health needs are there. Probably not to the magnitude of a big district, the scaling, but to try to do that at 10%, I think at the minimum, it is 1 day a week, which would, I guess, put that at 20% at the minimum. It's not 1 day every other week or a half day or whatever. It has to be at least a day. Okay. Otherwise, you're just putting out fires. You're not advancing anything. And I think you're leaving a lot of liabilities on the table. Now, if I was a new director for a CISA and my CISA was saying, oh, Dave, by the way, we are going to allocate you out 2 days a month to whatever district is their special ed director, I'd be like, no way, because that puts me at a liability, because I'm not able to do service, the due diligence I need to their district if I'm just, going there every 2 weeks, or just, even this, you say, well, they're a phone call away, but that's different. You're not moving anything. You're not moving the needle. You're just putting out fires. You're just putting the fire out by the phone. Hold the phone up, water comes out, fire's done. So I'm just saying, don't take a position that's a 10% position. You're not doing yourself any favor by doing that. And don't contract for that minimal amount of service. It should be a day a week at least. There's a lot in this role. Remember, we're talking about pupil services and allergy management and your Act 309 requirements under bullying and reporting, your OSEP, your OCR, your 504, your non-discrimination reporting, making sure also, that you're going to have things too, like your 5-year pupil non-discrimination report. How many activities are offered that have cut lists versus activities that don't, comparing those. I mean, there's just so many things that go into this role, and the medical needs, type 1 diabetic needs, or students that come in with very acute, complex, medical profiles. And those happen in the tiniest districts and they happen in the biggest districts. And usually in a tiny district, like that's where they have a harder time getting service. It's like a Bayfield, where you might have to drive an hour to see a mental health counselor. I talked to the director up there a couple of years ago, and it was one of those things where it was very hard to get services, and also get people to move there, because if you have to have sometimes employment. I mean, if you're married, so both people need employment in a small area. So it's one of those things where it might look good on paper, but as a director, I wouldn't even offer that service. If I was a director of a CISA, I would not offer. I would put a minimum of saying you have to contract 1 day of on-site director time. And I would do that for, one, the liability of the district and the liability of the director, and making sure that you are doing much more than putting out fires, because otherwise that position will just turn over perpetually. Every year it'll be somebody different. You're not going to have any of these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Nothing is going to move. Nothing will move. So, all right, kind of race through that. And I am going to go up to bed and also try to get warm because it is cold down here. So take care, everybody. This has been the Week 3 Fireside Chat.